Welcome to The Forge Focus, a podcast through The Forge, where we focus on our mission of enhancing manhood through our three pillars of positive imagery, quality fellowship, and service to others. These three pillars were created to help fight toxic masculinity and promote a healthy aspect of manhood. Here we will have personal discussions with men in the community and beyond who exemplify this mission and can share their experiences and perspectives in efforts to make us all just a little better than we were before listening in. I mean, hey, let's face it, we can all learn from each other, right? And now, your host, Ebony McNeil. Prepare to be forged.
Hey, what's up, y'all? This is Ebony coming to you from The Forge. Welcome back to Season 2 of the Forge Focus podcast, where we take our Forge mission and values and we slim it down and talk to gentlemen in the community who exemplify those values that we have, and we give them a chance to share individually versus in a group setting. So without further ado, I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to introduce my first guest here in Season 2, and I'm excited about it. This man is a case manager and recovery specialist and director of operations at the Hope Houses for the Hope Rescue Mission. He's also an author of the book Transformations, How to Get Your 180 Degrees. Now I'm going to let him explain to you everything else about him. Welcome my first guest of the season, Mr. Lee Cruz.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm totally excited to be here and being able to have an open discussion with you as well, Ebony. I think highly of you.
Thank you.
So as myself, I'm a person in long-term recovery. I'm going on 12 years sober come this May. But today I have 11 months and whatever months sober. So I was born in Brooklyn, New York, back in 1970. 6 months prior to me being born, my father had committed suicide. He shot himself. He shot his girlfriend because he came home and found her in bed with his brother. So he shot all three of them and took his own life. So 6 months later, I was born. 6 months after I was born, my mother left me at a welfare office and never to be seen again. So needless to say, they were scrounging up to see who would take care of me, tried to find some family members to take care of me. And I had an 18-year-old uncle who didn't have a relationship or nothing. So he took the task on and he quickly got married to a lady. Back in those days, it was racist time. So he got himself a wife. She was a light-complected Hispanic lady, all Spanish speaking. She had 3 kids. So when we were left at the welfare office, it was me and my sister, both dark-skinned. And when we moved in with them, he moved us out to Long Island. We grew up out there, and we were the only Spanish-speaking family back in 1973 on the island. Everybody else was Italian. So I didn't know English till the age of 13. So we got into a lot of fights. We got picked on a lot. We became the slaves of the house. So we took care of everything. We did the cleaning. If we didn't do it, we got beat. I got my hands burned for taking a cookie. I got whipped with whips. So there was a lot of physical abuse. Then there came a time from the age of 4 to the age of 14, I was being sexually molested. So that really messed me up as a kid. And I went to school, got into a lot of fights, acted out there. While I was home, I was trying to find a way to kill the person who was sexually molesting me. So I always got these bright ideas, break a casserole dish, put it back up on the cupboard, and hopefully he'd open it up, because it was his wife's brother. So he would come out to visit us every weekend, and every weekend he'd sleep downstairs, and I felt like I was being fed to him. So when I mentioned it, they were like, oh, that's a lie. So then I went to school and I told somebody, and they called CYS. Then I was threatened, if you keep this up, we're going to kill you. So then that stopped. So I kept fighting in school. I got really good at fighting. I became a boxer, got into martial arts. First, I learned off of Kung Fu theater.
I think we all did back then. I think we all thought we knew karate off of that.
I was Bruce Lee, big Bruce Lee guy. I would have the whole Bruce Lee outfit and wear it to school and jump over stuff. But I got into a lot of fights, and I used to beat up bullies. Then I became the bully, and I got into big trouble by taking a car, crashing into a house, and almost killed 2 kids, 2 little toddlers. And they sent me away upstate New York, a place called Camp Cass up in Rensselaerville, above Albany.
Okay.
I was at the very top of that mountain. I was up there for 2.5 years, from the age of 14 to 16. And when my 2 years were up, they gave me $100 and a bus ticket to the next best city in America, which was Camden, New Jersey, because they kicked me out of the state of New York. And I was like, okay. So I went to Camden, went to a school out there called Woodrow Wilson, played football there. Then I met my 10th grade teacher. He got me involved in Dancing on Air, USA Network. I
remember that.
Oh, wow.
I know, right? We all remember that show.
I was a regular out there, you know.
I saw that show.
Yeah, I used to swing in my fur vest.
We gotta find footage of that.
Curly got mad. I've been looking for those videos. But yeah, so I got some crazy pictures on how my hair used to look.
Stevie B.
They used to call me All the Barge. But you know, it was a crazy time in my life. I was still trying to find out who I was. So what I did find when I moved to Camden was alcohol. And alcohol became a very good friend because it helped keep me, it made me somebody, Superman, most likely. I was the man. I was Papi Chulo. You know, everybody was like, oh, this guy, he's fly. He got the curls. I could pick up girls. I had the gab of talk. You know, I could sit there and swindle anybody with the way I talked. And other people started noticing that. They introduced me to drugs, and I started dealing them. But I didn't want to become what they called a crackhead back then. So as long as I didn't do coke, I wouldn't be labeled as a crackhead. So I just drank, made money. I left there because there was a big incident with the Ninjas, was a gang out there in Camden. And my cousin had witnessed a murder. They wanted to kill our family. So I ended up moving to Allentown. When I moved to Allentown, I'm alone out here, and I'm like, I got to get a job. So my first job was at McDonald's, 15th Street in Allentown. I worked there for 2.5 years. There was a lady there. I hooked up with her. Ended up with 3 kids. While I was with her, in between the first kid, she ended up going back to the man she was with. Then I ended up with some other lady, and she ended up having my kid too. But what happened was, when I went back to the girl, that she said, oh, I want you back. So I went back with her. Here, the girl, I went to visit that son, which was my Leroy Cruz Jr. When I went to visit, the person that opened the door was my stepbrother. So not that he knew that I was with her, but it just so happened that he ended up meeting her at the same club. And as a person that didn't trust anybody or loved anybody, I was truly hurt, because he was my sidekick growing up. He was just a stepbrother, but he was the closest thing I had. And I was really hurt. And I remember trying to go around him, but it didn't feel good. It didn't sit right with me. So then I just disappeared, and we didn't have a relationship no more. So over the years, every once in a while I'd go by there, but I wouldn't pay attention to my son. Probably because I felt less of a man. I understand that today it was an ego thing, but living it then, I was like, I wish this guy was dead, right? Because I felt like he took something that was mine. But it didn't make sense to me that it was the actions that I took with the lady that ended up putting me where I was at. So anyways, long story short, my alcohol progressed. I picked up cocaine in 2020. Nope, that's a lie. 1992, I picked up cocaine. And I was still dealing in Allentown. I started going to jail for child support. My first charge I got was an aggravated assault with a robbery. And that was because I was walking down the street. I was high, I was drunk, and I kicked this old man's, he was an old man, I would say my age now, about 50. Kicked his cane, took his cane. Then I started walking across the 8th Street Bridge, and I beat some brothers up. And then I just kept walking, and I got arrested. So I went to jail for that. Then I got into a fight at a bar at Martusi's on 7th Street in Allentown. And I beat the 2 Spanish guys up with pool sticks. Like I said, I knew how to fight really good. So I got into a lot of fights. But anyways, all my dirt was done in Allentown. And I had a bunch of kids there. I have a total of 7 kids, 5 boys, 2 girls. I mentioned my second son because I'll get to that in a little bit. So needless to say, over the years, the drug progressed, the women progressed, the problems with the women's progressed, time in jail progressed. Altogether, I probably did 9 years in jail, in and out, a layaway plan. I was always put on probation. I could never finish it. My first DUI was in 1992. My last DUI was in 2012, because that's when I got sober. So my first DUI was in Berks County. I lived in Whitehall, Copley, Pennsylvania. I got drunk in Albertus, and I was supposed to go back to Whitehall, but I ended up on Fleetwood and Lyons Road, and I pulled over a state trooper by flashing my lights at him. He was a marked state trooper, but I was so drunk that I didn't know he was a marked state trooper, and he pulled over, followed me. My first DUI. My second DUI, I was in Butler County, used to live out in Pittsburgh, Butler County, PA. Left the bar, thought I was picking up a waitress. I was with a lady living out there, and I went back there because she had an accent. And I was like, I'm going to pick this lady up. And I go back over there, and I got drunk, and I got in the car. And I should have known then not to drive because she had to bring my keys out to me. She said, you forgot these. But I got in and I drove away with my lights off. And I could see the front porch light from the car when the cop pulled me over. I said, dude, can't you just let me? He's like, nope. Went to jail. That was my second DUI. My third and last DUI was in Hamburg. And 2 weeks after that, that's what opened my eyes. I said, I got to stop. You know, that's a very fast version of what, got me to where I'm at.
So you wound up going from, you said Pittsburgh area back to here.
Yep.
And then here it seems where you got established, like you said, you got clean and you decided to start helping in the community, I'm assuming.
Mm-hmm.
What kept you here versus, as you can see, you jumped around. So what kept you here?
So I would say what brought me here. Like I said, I lived in Allentown. The wife that I was with, I got married with my last daughter's mother. Her and I were together when I was in my second marriage. So when I left my second wife, my first wife, my second wife, and I already knew each other. So then when we got together, her and I were together for 20 years. Her and I got married while I was in jail. And at the time when I got married, it was a manipulative move because I needed somebody to send me letters. I needed somebody to send me commissary money. And I said, I love you. I need you to stick by me for 3 years until I get out. And she said, okay. And she truly loved me. I just needed mail and money. And, when I remember saying I do, she said I do. She left the jail and I went back to my cell. And I didn't hold my daughter for 3 years. I didn't touch my daughter till she was 3 years old when I got out of jail. Then when I got out of jail, we stayed together. We made a relationship. I'm sure at that time I loved her the way I knew love then, which was not good at all. So I got out of jail. I came out buff, and in a matter of 3 months, I was thin again. I was using cocaine. I was doing my drugs.
So you jumped right back into it.
Yep. And it progressed. I ended up homeless with her. We ended up moving to Hamburg. And when we moved to Hamburg, I remember jumping around from foundries. Always got a good job. I was a supervisor at all the foundries I worked at, but I was crazy. And I would drive my four-wheeler right to my machine. And they'd be like, dude, you can't do this. That's reek like alcohol. And I'll be like, whatever, cursing them out. Be like, you gotta go. All right, I'll get another job. But anyways, I kept doing coke. And I remember coming up with an excuse that we had to move. Ended up filling the truck up, saying I was moving, and I got an apartment. But at the end of the night, I had to tell my wife that I used all the money on cocaine and alcohol, and I didn't have a place to go. So we put our stuff in storage, took all my 4 kids, gave them to the neighbor. They watched our kids for 8 months. We were homeless on the streets. She would tell me when we regain everything, I'm going to go to church, talking about herself. And I was like, yeah, whatever, just get me another beer. And that's what she did. And when we obtained everything again, we got our house, I got a job. And St. Patrick's Day, I decided I wanted to celebrate like I was Irish. And after I was done drinking, I wanted to have a fire. And there was only 15 beers in the fridge. And for me, that wasn't enough. So I said, I got to drive to Leesport to get another case of beer. Then we'll just do the fire. She said, you don't need no more beer and your days are numbered. I said, nah, I'm going to be all right. So I shot up 61. When I turned, there was a Corvette next to me. And I had a big Superman emblem on the side of my car. I'm shooting up and the Corvette passed me. I passed the Corvette and I waved at him. He seen the cop, I didn't. So the cop stopped me. That was my last DUI. And then, like I said, I couldn't finish probation anywhere. But 2 weeks after that, we had a party. I remember kicking everybody out. My daughter told me she hated me. She said I was a piece of crap. And that hurt me. So I was like, I'm done.
That made you change?
Yeah. And I sat on the swing all day. Sat there and pissed myself. She came to me. She said, you want another beer? And I said, nope, I'm done. That next day I got up, I took a shower, and I went right to church. And the rest is history. I gave my life over to God, and here I am today.
Wow.
Yep.
So, yeah, we're going to talk about that a little more because, you know, it's the power of your child that told you how disappointed they were is what changed you. So we're going to talk about that a little deeper because I don't think people realize how powerful that moment really was. All right, so Lee, when I'm listening to your story, it's crazy because you had so many reasons, times, levels where you could have made the change. And I ain't gonna lie, I'm sitting here like, every time I thought you were about to say that's what changed me, it wasn't. It was another thing. So, you know, as a dad, I can acknowledge the power of your child being disappointed in you. Because as children, they naturally look up to us. So when it gets to the point where she didn't and she could tell you, I'm sure that really made you change. I'm glad to hear that did change you because if that was said and it didn't change, I honestly don't know where the story would have went. So I'm going to ask you a few things because when you're telling us and telling listeners your story, you know, there's a few things that really stuck out to me. So you had mentioned about being molested when you were young. And, you know, you had mentioned that you went to school and you told somebody and it pretty much, you got the backlash. And, you know, you were acting out based off what you were feeling from being molested. So, you know, one thing the Forge talks about is men and us hiding our feelings and closing them up. Was that type of thing going through your head when you were like, how did that affect you? Because you had to technically hide the biggest trauma you had gone through. So explain that, what you were thinking at that time.
So the things that I was thinking about as a young teenager, what I struggled with the most was, why am I being molested by a man? Why is this guy find me attractive? And is there something wrong with me? Am I a homosexual? So what happened was that I used my body with so many different women to prove to myself that I wasn't gay, if that makes any sense. And it wasn't that I was trying to use women or treat them like crap. It was I was trying to prove to me that I was a man, which hurts as a man in recovery today. What the barriers were for me that I didn't really know then. If only then I would have had a therapist, a counselor, somebody to coach me along and say, it's all right to feel this way. It wasn't your fault.
And that's crazy because I feel that's a lot of what happens with men, young men especially. Something happens. It makes them question themselves and they start doing activities or actions or words that is their way of trying to prove who they are, whether it be to themselves or other people.
Right.
You know, I know plenty of men, even including myself, if I'm being transparent, there was a point in life where men sleep with as many women as possible to prove something. Not even because it's just pleasurable, you know, it's to prove I'm not Mr. Nice Guy, or to prove I am as cool as this guy over here, or to prove to the girl that left you that she should have stayed because look at all these other women that want me. But with yours, it's even deeper than that. So I applaud you for being able to look back on that now, because that's a tough thing. You know, like you said, trying to figure out your identity, let alone wondering if it made you homosexual, even though it doesn't, obviously.
So the funny thing with that too is that I was struggling with the identity of being a man, and then I was dealing with the racism part. I'm a dark-skinned 100% Puerto Rican man, and I was back in those days. I was called black, right?
Well, you
use the N-word.
I think you got darker than me, bro.
So I was always offended.
And
I
your
grew
name's
up
Leroy.
Yeah, right. And it ain't Leroy. Let's not let that go.
And I was raised in the Hamptons out of Long Island where everybody was Italian. So it made me that racist person then. Oh, wow. If that makes any sense. So I looked at brothers like, oh, those ain't my people. You know, I was in my... And I joke about this at times, but it's really not that funny. I'll be like, I'm white. That's who I am. I'm white. And they'd be like, don't you ever like walk by mirrors? Because you black.
Yeah, you ain't white if you try, bro.
And now, you know, when I met Hamilton, I met you, and I deal with more African American people today than I did 12 years ago. Before recovery.
Even like when you were in Allentown and stuff like that?
Even when I was dealing drugs, anything. It was always Spanish people or white people.
Wow.
That's why I mentioned to you, I'm married to a white lady. But that's because that's the environment I grew up in. And so that has always been my go-to. I've always dated white women.
Because of the identity that you developed, not even that you had.
Well, it was the identity that was developed to me in the environment I grew up in.
Gotcha. That's deep.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. What? You know, so when you think about your story, and you had mentioned that your father died 6 months before you were born, do you think that had an effect on the story that you had? Because you have a very elaborate story, and there are times where I'm listening to it, I'm like, wow, nobody talked him out of that or coached him out of that. But again, you didn't have a father. So do you think that had an effect on how your story went?
That had the biggest effect in my life. My whole life, I hated my father. I never met my father. He was dead before I was born. But I blamed my father my whole life until I got sober for my life. For the life that I had, because he took his life. I had to live in agony, pain, being molested, the racism. I blamed everything on him. But if he would have been alive, I could still had gone through all those same things, right?
Yes.
So today I understand that. But all those years prior to me in recovery, I blamed him. All those years before recovery for me, I blamed my mother. I did meet my mother right before she died. I'm pretty sure Hamilton knows this. She ended up with cancer. I have a sister here in Reading. And we met. She told me that my mother was in the cancer center, and I was like, I don't care about that lady. I used better words. And I got depressed for 3 days. I worked at the hospital. And I remember my wife coming into the room. She wasn't my wife then, but she came into the room. She opened up all the windows. She said, "This ain't the man I met. You were either going to make a decision today, but you got to go back to work, or you're going to go see your mother. It's either one, but you're doing something." So 10 minutes later, I got my bag ready and we went to Virginia. And I met her. I didn't hug her or forgive her until the third visit. We went out to see her in Virginia for 6 months. And I rekindled our relationship. I forgave her after the third visit. I went out to visit her every weekend for 6 months, and then she died. And it was...
It's all right.
It was the toughest thing for me in my recovery. And I was depressed. She never gave me anything, and I remember she gave me a pillow. She went into her closet. She said, "Go into that closet. I got something for you in there." And she gave me this colorful zebra-looking pillow that you buy at Walmart. And she said, "I want you to have that." And I was like, in my head, I'm like, you ain't never given me nothing your whole life, and you will give me a pillow. But when I drove home, I had that pillow on a seatbelt. And when she passed, I held on to that pillow for 3 months in my depression.
Wow.
So I learned a lot through that. And I thank my wife for that. She died in my wife's hands. And yeah, that was a tough one.
Wow. Wow.
So I blamed both my parents my whole life. And she freed me from all that pain the day she died. The day I forgave her.
Wow. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the weight you were carrying all that time. And like you said, as you're going through these things, as you're having this time in your life, you have this blame for your parents, and it feels like it's the world against you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you speak to the young men who may be paying attention, or the men? They don't even have to be young, who are listening, and give them your thoughts on how they explain that to them. Talk to them and say, "Hey, it's," you know what I mean? Because right now, I guarantee there's some men who are going through the same thing. They're struggling, and they're blaming other people, and they're holding resentment. Can you speak to that?
Oh, yeah. Well, what I can say is I've been working in the field for over 11 years now. And something I always tell men, it's okay to allow yourself to be vulnerable and tell your secrets to the person that you trust the most. And most men don't trust anybody.
Speak. That's true.
Most men are in relationships with women and they can't even talk to them because they don't even know how to be a partner themselves. They're just there. So what I would suggest is to find another man and let all those secrets out. Because we all carry secrets. Even as people in recovery, we have secrets. It's just who we are because we don't know how somebody else is going to visualize us or judge us by whatever it is we're carrying. So you always have to have that one good person, 10 good people on your side that you could always let that stuff out. Because the worst thing in life is holding stuff inside. It gives you nightmares. It has you acting out in different ways. It could be gambling, could be drinking, could be smoking, could be energy drinks. It could be anything. But if you don't have an outlet, you're always going to carry it. And what's going to happen is eventually it comes out. And it comes out negatively, always a bad result. So my best thing is find a support system, someone to talk to, let that out. Allow other people to give you feedback on whatever it is you're going through. Just because somebody's giving you feedback, it's not that they're looking at you wrong, but they're able to see and hear what you're telling them and they can give you a better sense of understanding than the better sense you're making it to be in your own head.
So when you mentioned about men not being able to talk to their women, why do you think that is?
So let me ask you a question. So did you ever realize that in the beginning of a relationship, we allow ourselves to tell our women everything we want, we tell them?
Yeah.
We're at that chase stage, right? We are pretty much in every addiction. The chase is the biggest part of the addiction. So for me, it was my wife, right? I chased my wife. I loved my wife. But there comes a time that it just becomes, you come home, you go to work. It's not the fireworks it used to be in the beginning. And it's because somebody's closing each other out. It's either the wife or the husband.
Okay.
Right? So you're no longer talking the way you used to talk because you feel you talked each other out of everything you wanted to talk about. So if you don't consistently keep that communication line open, there's no more communication. So that's the same thing with men. Like when you have mentors, a mentor will shut down if you don't have nothing to feed him because he's no longer needed. Does that make sense?
It does. But I liked how you stress that they should go find a man to talk to. 'Cause I know a lot of men won't talk to women. And part of it is like maybe what they've said in the past was used against them. And you know, when you mentioned too, it's okay to be vulnerable. But as a man, it's hard to be vulnerable to a woman who you're supposed to be the Superman too.
That's right.
You know what I mean? So I appreciate you articulating that because it's important that men do find other men to speak to, share with. It's important to find that woman too, don't get me wrong, but you have to find someone. So if you're not at a place where you feel you can talk to that woman, you got to talk to that
And
man.
then some men are more comfortable talking to women, and some men are more comfortable talking to another man. I suggest that whatever makes you comfortable, just make sure you talk about it. Because at the end of the day, left to our own devices, we fail all the time.
It's funny you said, it's crazy because that's something I know me, Hamilton, or a lot of us, we talk about that. Like that's why you need that person because your thoughts will take you in the wrong direction. That's what human nature is. We're the only, that's what we do. You know, we can convince ourselves to do things wrong a lot easier than we get to convince ourselves to do things right. So, like you said, you need somebody to bounce it off of. Even if you've already made the decision, sometimes you just got to talk to somebody else and say, hey, this is what I went through. What do you think? This is what I'm dealing with. What do you think? Your story, when I'm listening to it, that's something I took away from. Like, you didn't have anybody to talk to, and it was causing you to act out through everything. And I think you and I had even spoken about that previously. Like, that's why you were getting in trouble when you first moved, because these things were happening, and not only were you questioning your own sexuality, it was just anger.
And see, and to put the justice system in it, they get the actions after, right? Like, all your childhood traumatic events have been building up for how long? But then once you act out, that's when you get in trouble. You get put in the judicial system, and now you're this tagged guy. You're a bad person. You're on probation. Oh my God, you better watch out for that person. But nobody ever looks at what happened to that point, right? And a lot of men in this area that I know that I've dealt with and worked with, they've never dealt with that part. Everybody always, as soon as they get on probation, now they got to be introduced to highway safety classes, DUI classes, drug and alcohol treatment, right? But what you need to address is all this back here, the long tail, the whole life story, and nobody ever addresses that. So I always encourage people to go see a licensed professional, go talk to a therapist, a counselor, not because they're crazy, because as soon as you tell somebody you need to go see a psych, right away they think that you're making them out to be a crazy person, and they're not. It's just that those are the things you got to deal with, all that traumatic events that happened throughout your life in order to deal with who you are today.
Wow. So you dealt with a lot, and it seems like you now pour your story and your past into others to help them out. Mm-hmm. So I just want to say thank you for that, because we need more men like you who are transparent, who are willing to share, because that's one thing. Like, we all know men go through it, but it's still not a comfortable thing when you think you're alone, because say I didn't know your story, I wouldn't feel comfortable about telling you my problems.
Right.
You know what I mean? I need to know that men need to know that other men have these problems, because we're made to have to figure it out.
Right. And it's just allowing, like I said earlier, allowing the community leaders to allow themselves to be vulnerable, share their stories. That way, people that can relate to it are able to open up and share theirs as well. Agreed.
Well, we could go on all day, but before we finish, I wanted to thank you for coming on, and as a gift, just give you one of our Forge t-shirts, because you fit our mission and everything we symbolize and we try to push out into the universe. So thank you for everything you have done.
Thank you
for sharing just a portion of your story. That portion alone was a lot. I'm sure plenty of people got something from that. So I just want to say thank you, provide you with a gift. Thank you for coming on and sharing your time and sharing your story with us. And I'm hoping that somebody got something from it as much as I did, because I know I was entranced in your story. So
thank you very much, and thank you for having me.
No problem.
I'll wear this proudly.
My pleasure, buddy. Thank you so much.
Of course.
Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed this last episode. If you have, please check back and check our previous episodes. Also, make sure you watch it, make sure you like it, and most importantly, make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel. Here at The Forge Focus, we just want to make sure that we're sending out positive vibes and great information from men in the community who can affect it and affect society as a whole. So again, please stay tuned. We got some more great things coming up for you. Prepare to be forged.
We hope you enjoyed this episode, and more importantly, learned something that can affect your perspective on yourself and manhood as a whole. If you have found the value that we expect that you did, we encourage you to hit the like and subscribe button and share this video. Spread the word and tell anyone in your life who can benefit. We'll see you on the next episode. Prepare to be forged.